Greetings, dear listeners. Before we get started, a reminder to head on over to wisdomofcrowds.live and consider becoming a paying subscriber if you're not one yet. You'll get access to, among other things, the full conversation, as well as other subscriber-only benefits. And don't forget to give us a like and review on your favorite podcast app. With all that out of the way, on to the show. What's your agenda, Shadi?
Your article bothered me a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh.
But before we get into that, maybe you should just share with our dear listeners and viewers what exactly you wrote and why you wrote it. And maybe help us understand your state of mind a little bit better at this point in your life, at this point in American politics.
Why do you want to hurt Shadi so much? Tell us, Damir.
I wrote the essay because I wanted to hurt.
Dark place?
No, why? Was that a dark essay? It was not. It was good.
I thought it was pretty positive, but go on. Please tell us.
Ends with Lincoln. Lincoln is good. Lincoln is the best. I don't know. I guess it's complicated. It's sort of like many things, like usually when you end up writing anything. I don't know. I feel like it's something we've been discussing for a very long time on this podcast, so it's actually not an essay out of character at all, which is that, I don't know, that Trump is sort of a symptom, not a cause, a symptom of deeper things in society. And I guess I was prompted, Shadi, I think it was, we were at that dinner at our friend's house, and you might have even brought it up on a podcast once. I don't remember, but I definitely remember at the dinner you said, "No, come on, Damir, you think all this Trump stuff's terrible," and I just sort of over protested, saying, "No, it's great. I'm still in for the ride." But I was sort of trying to think through that, and like I said in the essay, someone on Twitter challenged me about my earlier sort of ebullience about what Trump represents, especially for conservatism, and whether I regretted any of that early ebullience. And I guess it's less about enthusiasm, but more about this feeling that
ebullience means happiness, by the way. It means enthusiasm, for those who are wondering.
Shoddy GPT. Yeah.
So is it fair to say, Damir, that you were happy? Yeah, you were happy in the early days of Trump.
Nah, I'm not. I guess what I'm saying is that, like, I was giddy, and I'm still sort of giddy, I think is the right way to put it. I think that's probably a fair way to put it.
Giddy, dizzy with joy.
You are the only one who's giddy at this point, Damir.
I'm not sure that's true. I mean, the Trumpists are giddy. They're happy.
Okay,
Stephen Miller's giddy. I'm sure he's super happy.
Put aside the dyed-in-the-will MAGA types.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I guess my challenge to you guys is do you think we could be existing in a different world? And I think that's where the essay is the jumping off point. Is could it have been otherwise? And certainly, I mean, I grant that it wasn't such an overwhelming victory. It's very easy to imagine that had things just played out somewhat differently in the campaign, had Biden stepped down earlier, had they had a different candidate, but not even a different candidate, like just it had things lined up somewhat differently, you could have a President Harris right now. And I guess my contention is that would have solved nothing in the bigger picture. And we'd be in some variant of where we are right now. Maybe not with Trump alive. Maybe Trump would be dead at this point, or in 4 years from now, or however. But it just feels like all of this stuff is, in the mail, and we have to go through it. We can't avoid it, I guess, is my ultimate feeling that was driving the essay. Now, the essay sort of, I mean, we can talk about the specifics in it.
Yeah, and of
what
course
you guys
we'll
think
include
about
a link to this, a link in the show notes, so everyone should take a look and give it a read. Before we dive in, though, can you just give us a sense of your assessment of Trump's first 100 days if you had to condense the experience in just, 30 seconds to a minute? What would be the overall Damir take? Just so I know
tough
a
assignment.
little bit more precisely where you're coming from.
Idiots. I think that's my one word take on it. Like a bunch of fucking idiots. I think two more words: drunk revolutionaries, stupid drunk revolutionaries. Maybe those three words for you right there. There have been many surprises, and they've all been on the level of, wow, I didn't think we could really put people that stupid that high up in power. And while it's been fascinating to watch, what exactly happens if you pull on that lever at just that time with that much violence, and what destructions comes of it. But ultimately, I think that's my main assessment of it. So many just mind-boggling decisions, with at the heart of it being, I think, the whole tariff song and dance, which just continues to amuse and amaze. But yeah, that's my assessment. I don't know. How about, why don't you guys give me yours as well, since we're doing this? Let's not. Who cares about my assessment? What do you think, Christine? How did you live through the first 100 days?
Well, first of all, I just want to clarify, do we mean drunk in sort of a metaphysical sense, or like, Pete Hegseth-esque, just like actually drunk?
We know
Because
Trump
I think,
is a teetotaler, right?
yeah,
Which is,
yeah.
that's the main thing. I mean, one trusts Pete Hegseth more than Donald Trump in that regard. Never trust someone who doesn't drink as a matter of principle, right?
That's messed up, Damir.
I'm not sure I'd go that far. I'd say trust neither of them.
Yeah.
I think that the first 100 days have been, the first word that jumped to my mind was tiring.
Mm.
And I think that the first 100 days of the first Trump administration were tiring too, but in a sort of like shock and awe way. Like there was too much happening from the Trump administration, but also too much happening from, or rather a lot happening on the resistance side. And so like just everything seemed to be happening all at once. This time, there's too much happening from the Trump administration, and the public is mostly just tired, period. Too tired to resist, too tired to follow the news, just sort of exhausted by it all in a way that feels different from the first Trump administration. And then the second thing, I would also say cruel. I think, and again, you could have said this about the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, but that administration was kind of hapless. Like it was trying to do things, but like some of its policies were enacted kind of accidentally. And, if they had sort of cruel outputs, they were almost accidental. But this administration just seems determined to be visibly, mimetically unkind on purpose. Is not abashed at it at all, is in fact doing more than last time. And I think that's also a visible shift from the last time, and something that
Worth
this
pointing out,
100
Adam
days has been
Serwer
about.
did come up with that cruelty is the point last term, right? So
He did, yeah, and I actually think that he
jumped the gun.
might have jumped the gun on that.
Shadi, what's your quick take before we start picking stuff apart?
Yeah, so I might disagree with Christine a little bit about the lack of resistance. I thought that initially in the first few weeks, but I've sort of been heartened by, there is a kind of energy that's returned. It's not in the same way that it was during the first term, which was much more vocal and public and in the form of protests, large protests. But when I look at what the courts are doing, how they are the kind of line of defense against the Trump administration's excesses, and how that's kind of inspiring, that I wake up every day now and I think to myself, thank God for the judicial branch, thank God for judges. And I mean, there isn't really a third branch anymore, so we're now in this kind of odd moment of only two branches of government that are co-equal, and now they're sort of at loggerheads with each other, as we've talked about in previous podcasts. And I think there is an energy in a certain part of the Democratic Party. It's really not the Democratic Party at all, considering that it's mostly Bernie Sanders and AOC and a few other folks going across the nation and bringing out these very large crowds, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 in places you wouldn't expect, a massive rally in Salt Lake City of all places. So, I think that people understand the gravity of the moment in a way they didn't a few months ago, and that's leading people to say, well, okay, we're tired, we're exhausted, but we have to do something. And I'm sort of in that camp that I would never consider myself a resistance person. I was actually very critical of the idea of being in a resistance mode, but I've been radicalized by the last couple of months, and I've sort of I feel myself returning to my roots as kind of a left-wing populist, that I'm again enamored by Bernie Sanders and what he represents, that we need something vigorous and unapologetic. And this sort of gets to what you said in your wait, actually it's not your piece. I've read a bunch of pieces at the same time earlier today. Sorry. It was actually Ross Douthat's piece from last year, Donald Trump, Man of Destiny, where he says that Democrats, if they're serious, have to return the favor. That Republicans and what Trump represents is world historical, and Democrats can't just be the party of normalcy. They have to be able to strive for something that meets the moment. And I feel like whatever you think about someone like Bernie Sanders, he does aspire to something greater. So anyway, just to say, this is all worse than I thought, and I have to maybe acknowledge that I did get some things wrong. I maybe underestimated Trump.
No.
Wow. Honestly,
Look,
congratulations.
Come on.
Wait,
for saying that, Shadi.
Wait, Damir, what do you don't think that's
No, I'm just
warranted?
saying you should never admit anything.
That's one thing you could have learned from Trump, I guess.
90, whatever.
But I think on the podcast, the point.
Yeah. This is not the Newt Gingrich podcast. Fair enough. Go on. Be honest. Be honest with your failures. And
Not yet.
shortcomings.
No promises.
Not yet.
I thought Trump would be bad, and I thought he would be authoritarian. But I didn't think he would go as far as he did, and on the speech stuff. Like,
would you say that you didn't imagine that the leopards would eat your face?
Okay, I don't know exactly what that means in this context.
Okay.
No, but
can you say a little
bit
more, Christine?
No, I mean it's a meme going around. Actually, I think it's been going around for a long time. But woman who voted for the leopards eating people's faces party sobs. I didn't believe the leopards would eat my face.
But Shadi didn't vote.
I think I know what you're talking
Trump,
about. But I mean, and this is why I try to remind people who maybe have misremembered the past. I came out publicly, reluctantly, for Kamala Harris, including in a debate that we did here on Wisdom of Crowds with our friend Haroon Mogul, where I laid out the case for why Arabs and Muslims and progressives and anyone else should just suck it up and vote for Kamala despite all of their reservations. So I'm glad, so I can point to a record. Granted, I wasn't enthusiastic about Kamala Harris, but I think that's
Nor
justified.
should you be. Nor should you be, though.
Exactly.
I mean, I guess that's my point.
Nobody in America was enthusiastic about her, and that's what we get.
And again,
maybe to Damir's point.
Right. It gets back to that question, right? It's like, I think I agree with you, Shadi, about the only energy being AOC and Bernie, and quite frankly, they're insofar as they are only rallying people at this point, they're doing it the right way, which is just, I mean, it's the way that the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny basically did it, which is just call these people thieves and crooks and liars. And not really, lean into whatever positive agenda I think Bernie and AOC have, which is not likely to be all that popular, quite frankly. So, just to sort of do that, it is sort of a mystery why other Democrats haven't joined them in that. Like, and maybe that's for a different episode. We can talk why Democrats are so ham-fisted on it. But I think that where I agree with you, and I don't know, Christine, if you're there as well, is this idea that, and this is what I think is was what drove my piece that I just wrote, is this idea that there's no going back. That even had we elected Kamala Harris, not sure that that would have stabilized things in any meaningful way. And so this idea, especially after what Trump has been able to do to sort of the institutional balance in this country, the idea that we can have like normal politics after this is just not very likely. So the biggest losers in this is the Democratic Party of Nancy Pelosi, that entire sort of institutional thing. And we still don't know what's going to take its place, if it's going to be the party of AOC or like the party of a different kind of authoritarian like Rahm Emanuel or something like that. But
so I want you to elucidate a little bit more for our listeners. What exactly do you think couldn't go on like this? I mean, I understand what you're saying, that electing Kamala would have been sort of kicking whatever issues America is struggling with right now, kicking the can down the road an administration or two. They would still be there. What are the specific things that would be there? Is it immigration? Is it economic inequality? Like, what are just the sort of general feel?
There's two. I mean,
the vibes.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, vibes. I don't know vibes, but I suppose if you have to use like that term for something, I guess I just put it in the extent to which Steve Bannon's the speech that he's said to have written, the American Carnage speech. I think that as a rallying cry, the salience of that as a rallying cry would not have been eased by 4 years of old guard Democratic rule. I guess that's the simplest way to put it. And the question, I think it's the wrong question to ask whether Trump/Bannon's American Carnage speech reflects an objective, like scientific reality of what America is. It's whether it's politically potent. And as long as it's politically potent, I think that you have this kind of politics existing. You can't wish that away. And I don't think that the old Democrats, not just because Biden is old, but I think, that entire party was capable of defanging any of that. I guess that's my sort of feeling. So yes, immigration, economics, I'd add to that all sorts of foreign policy questions that would have come up over time. I mean, quite frankly, we saw Gaza rip apart Democrats. And, I think like Ukraine on life support for another 4 years, that would have probably blown up at some point. The whole question of Europe. I mean, those are the things that I follow very closely, so I could like go more in depth on that. But I would say all of that, none of that would have been like even moved a little bit to being solved under Democrats, I guess is my feeling.
I do feel that
you're looking at like a slow kind of grind for 4 more years, and then whatever comes after that also bad, I guess is my prediction. I mean, it's an assertion. I can't prove it, obviously.
I mean, also bad, definitely. I do think, I'm joking but not totally joking here, that like 4 to 8 years of a sort of Kamala Harris-led Democratic Party with, a tech alliance could have eased us into a sort of Brave New World-esque Soma-induced quiescence once AI had grown up a little bit and the internet and sort of mega tech corporations were given even more power over our lives. But I guess that doesn't escape the issues. That just sort of buries them in an uglier way.
That's a prediction. That's how the politics of that would work out. Again, that's really hard to predict. And I mean, we may see it now, as these things sort of hit their stride under Trump, right? And then who knows what that'll do to that. I mean, I think those are like exogenous factors. But sorry, Shadi, you were saying.
But Damir, here's the quibble, though, that if Kamala had won, it would mean that there wouldn't have been a second Trump term. And that could have made maybe not all the difference, but a lot of difference. And because no one in the Republican Party is able to replicate what Trump is able to do. And I think that authoritarianism of the sort that many Republicans now believe in, it needs to be tempered by a kind of humor, a lightness, a charm, the charisma that only Trump has. I don't think J.D. Vance could do exactly, or something even similar, really, at least with the same success that Trump is currently doing. And so I do feel that there is something so unique and singular about Donald Trump and what he is, that if we had just been able to cordon him off for 4 more years, it wouldn't have solved problems, but it would have prevented it. We would have just had a very different future for the Republican Party and for the next kind of stage of leadership. That's one thing I would say.
Yeah.
But just to kind of to drive a certain point home a little bit more, I don't think your argument, as I understand it, Damir, at least in your piece, is just that it couldn't have been otherwise. I mean, the title of the piece is "We Deserved It," so I think you're saying something a little bit more provocative, that there's something that we have committed sins as a nation, and you actually do use the word sins, and you use religious language and imagery, and you're making a quasi-religious argument that there is a kind of like cosmic justice, a kind of mystical reality that we have to acknowledge, that Trump in some sense was ushered in by forces beyond our understanding. And we can call them spiritual, cosmic, religious, whatever it might be. And he would have been ushered in because of what we had done. You say that, I think, fairly explicitly, and I want you to account for an argument which I think is a little bit nuts. Like, it's not a reasonable argument. I mean, it's a clever one. It's an interesting one.
It's interesting and not disprovable. Most importantly,
I mean, it's mystical, so it doesn't have
so
to be reasonable in the way that you understand it, Shadi.
Yeah,
true. But also, Damir's not a believer, so it's just interesting to me that all of a sudden now he's appealing to religion to explain Trump.
Well, I mean, like, I think it's you can get at this. There's like 2018, I wrote an essay that I sort of keep coming back to, which really I do feel like aged pretty well, which is about that, you can trace Trump's antecedents going back to, I mean, you can trace it back to Nixon if you really, really want to, but you can pretty much trace it back to Pat Buchanan's speech in 1991. And so then there's like a logic, sort of a bipartisan political logic that plays out since then. And I think that would be an argument I've played many a time before, and that's the secular version of the argument. And so one could say that, this is another attempt at writing this out in a different register. If you want to strip away all the religious stuff, that's your argument there. And it's one of, total complicity and about political decay, and that this is the end result of political decay. Again, I don't know. You guys know me well enough. This is sort of the stuff I end up swimming in. But then, it's a friend was reading Jeremiah, and I had not read it, so I went and jumped ahead in my Bible reading and read that book of the Bible, and there's some good stuff in there. Basically Old Testament, ye old-timey prophet, unhappy, very angry God, wrathful. Yeah, Old Testament stuff, as they call it. And some, good stuff, and it just got me again thinking about how we think about and talk about politics, especially when catastrophe befalls us. And again, like I said in the essay, then I ended up reading another, I guess he can be classed as a religious writer. He certainly thought of himself as a proud Catholic after the French Revolution, Joseph de Maistre, but he's also well known as a sort of one of the great grandfathers of proto-fascist kind of thinkers. And he's writing about the French Revolution, which to him is like one of the greatest catastrophes ever. But he comes up with a even more interesting sort of way to think about it, which is tied to lack of free will. And again, as you guys know, since we've talked about it, that's another little fascination of mine. The whole question of insofar as we think about things in religious terms. How do you account for free will? And there's different traditions. Different traditions do it different ways. But I'm always attracted to it when in the Christian tradition there's less free will. And that just took me literally the day I was writing. I think it was Jason Willick said to me, he's like, "Oh, this sounds all really interesting. You should go reread Lincoln's second inaugural." And I did, and it's just incredible. It's really worth rereading every so often, and just reading it closely, it jumped out at me even more. And I think Lincoln does, probably, easily our greatest statesman, our greatest political orator, our most intelligent, thoughtful, philosophical president. How he weaves together a lot of these themes about providence, about the unknowability of God's will. I think that's probably the most important thing that I wanted to take away from this. And therefore, maybe this is, Christine, why you said, you didn't find it all that depressing, is that, what I took away from rereading the second inaugural there and sort of trying to think through the fact that, we're all complicit in the politics that brings us Donald Trump, is that as long as we hold on to this idea that, we all share some complicity and don't fall into a kind of righteous mode of however obviously repellent and grotesque the Trump administration is, but as long as we share in some of the responsibility of how we got here together, that's our way out. And so that's basically the essay. So I'm not sure what you didn't like so much about it, Shadi, except the lack of free will, which is probably the core of it.
That's a big issue.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that, Shadi.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm a strong believer in free will. I do worry that certain kinds of arguments are cop-outs by attributing to these impersonal forces like history and saying that history moves in particular ways and we don't have control over it, that we're almost slaves to a certain kind of historical trajectory, whether it's progress, whether it's regression, whether it's something in between. And this idea that we don't really have agency and that individuals don't make choices. I mean, basically, Damir, as far as I can tell, you're saying that we're prisoners to world historical forces beyond our control. So that's my major objection, that I simply don't believe that.
Well, are you saying, I have actually two questions there, one for you, Shadi, and one for Damir. A clarifying one for Damir first. In this piece, then, are you actually saying that we're prisoners to sort of world historical forces, or simply to just mistakes that have been made in the past of American politics that were just probably going to come haunt us at some point, and now they're here? Maybe they didn't all have to show up at the same time in the person of Donald Trump and in this administration, but they were all... They're we kicked a ball at one point in American history. It's going to roll back around in one way or another. Or are you ascribing the arrival of Trump in this administration as part of a greater sort of, I don't know, world revolutionary kind of trend in history?
You want me to answer that? I don't think there's anything like that. And anyway, look, let me just answer it that way. Again, this is why the Lincoln, rereading the second inaugural is so good, is because it's an incredibly elegant way to I think preserve the right amount of agency and preserve the right amount of humility. Because I think what's particularly repellent to me about modernity and the sort of way, I think that you can boil down what you said, Shadi, into kind of, I think, a one-dimensional or a very two-dimensional sort of way. Is we are agents, we are agents of control in history, and we are change agents. We have intimate personal responsibility for all this, that, the other, and therefore we must, I don't know. It's that kind of dumb individualism. Now, I know you didn't. I know you didn't say that, but I'm just saying that's the danger of of your counter
Yeah.
to what I'm getting at. That's all. I didn't mean that you're that. And what's so remarkable about Lincoln's formulation is that he is in the same breath acknowledging the unique evil of slavery, in the same breath as acknowledging the horrific evil of, a war, pitting brother against brother, and in no way ultimately saying we in the North are the righteous ones in this, but in fact the entire country is being punished by this war for a collective, sin that we have perpetuated. And so ultimately, it's that passage where he says, we all fervently pray that these horrors will end soon, but our prayers may go on unanswered because actually the actual scope of justice and how it will play out is not visible to us. So it injects a level of humility to it, which is to say, we don't know basically what the actual plot is, and it would be very presumptuous to assume that we do. Whereas that level of humility, just even in normal folk understandings of the Civil War, that level of complexity and nuance doesn't shine through. But it's very much there in the second inaugural. It's really impressive. So that's my answer to Christina, I guess, is that no, it's not like some sort of world historical thing, and or I would just maybe put it differently. It's more like I'm not sure that it would be akin to blasphemy to declare one way or the other on it, or at least hubris, not blasphemy. It would be hubristic to declare one way or the other, because we have no claim to be able to know of where all of this is going. And at the same time, though, back to Lincoln and the other part that I think is important, he was not saying, therefore, there's nothing we can do with this. It's in the midst of the war. The war continues, and we have to continue fighting the war. So it's not like a counsel to helplessness and be like, let the good Lord decide. Let fate, let Providence just take us where it is. Passivity, and this is where, I think one can productively talk about free will and yet not claim for oneself ultimate sovereignty. I guess that's the thing, and that's something that I've been wrestling with and pushing back and forth for some time now. For the longest time, I've not felt really comfortable with the idea of free will. It doesn't make full sense to me. Yet, obviously, it exists to a certain extent because we order our lives and our inner selves around the concept that we are sovereign. So there's a kind of partial sovereignty to it, lying in between the experience that each one of us have, and then something one might call history or providence or whatever you will. And that's existence, I guess, is the way I'd put it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I have to say, I'm really loving your openness to the mystical workings of Providence these days, Damir, and I want to talk more about that. But actually, this leads me to my question for Shadi, which was, as you said, you're extremely invested in the idea of free will, of our making choices, but you continue to talk about Trump in a way, actually, before we started recording this podcast, we were sharing and talking about an old Ross Douthat piece about Trump as a man of destiny. And the way that you talk about Donald Trump before the election, and even now, somewhat more begrudgingly, I think, that you no longer sort of believe that he might be fine, is that he is this figure of charisma and massive not totally understood skill. And once he happened on the scene, there's nothing you can do about it. Donald Trump is here. JD Vance couldn't have pulled this off. Josh Hawley couldn't. But this one man is able to do all of this, which seems, I don't know if this is what you intend, but it almost seems as if you're letting yourself or others off the hook a little bit? Like, are you really celebrating your free will if you're like, well, I have free will, but this guy is just so mystical, so special. There's just something about him. Like, I
He
can't
is
do
really
anything about it
good.
now. He's here. Like this idea of Donald Trump as just a very, very special man who is causing all of these things, to me, feels like it's giving him actually perhaps more power or more agency, more respect, in fact, than he actually deserves in this moment. He is charismatic, sure. He like has good animal instincts around politics, but he's also just like a weird old guy who is getting older and is prone to gaffes and makes incredibly stupid decisions.
Yeah, so that's probably yeah, I have a different view of Trump than that. I do sort of see him, and maybe this is where Damir and I kind of come together, and maybe we're both falling into some kind of great man fallacy. I don't think that believing in free will means you can't also believe that there are individuals who do momentous, consequential things. So I don't think it undermines my free will point. Does it lead to, can it lead to a certain kind of passivity to kind of think of Trump in these terms? I suppose it could, but the way that I see it is that if Trump is a singular figure in contemporary American life, that means that the rest of us need to rise to the occasion, that normal politics and normal answers won't be enough, that Trump is a revolutionary. And that means the other side must also have a kind of revolutionary spirit. So I don't think it forces us to resign ourselves to some kind of fate and say, oh my, Trump is so special, so there's nothing we can do. It just means that there is something we can do. It's just a lot more than what we've done. But I think this is where myself, Douthat, Damir, and I think that Ross Douthat's piece really gets at this very well, and I would highly recommend it to our listeners. That there is, I don't know, I'm sort of in awe of him, but I don't think, but I think
He's a great man like Trump. The great pundit of history, Ross Douthat.
No, I meant I'm in awe of Trump, not Ross. But I mean, I'm a big fan of Ross. I think you misunderstood that.
It's like,
No,
wow,
no,
I wouldn't put them
Ross
in the same
Douthat
category personally.
Is the Napoleon of punditry. Absolutely. He's not the Trump of punditry. He's the Napoleon of punditry. Anyway.
Yeah.
You're in awe of Trump, you said.
Yeah. And I just have to admit that is how I feel. I think that I'm undermining my own points now, but there does seem to be something really crazy about the fact that he's been able to bounce back from the fact that he doesn't seem to be able to lose, the fact that he seems like impervious to the kind of normal currents of human life. Like anyone who had done the things that Trump did would just be out of it. It would be done. We could sort of close the chapter on that. But
okay,
the
so
fact
now,
that he is I'm
in,
falling
in,
into
in,
some of your own.
Argument,
yeah.
So now indulge my argument a little bit because I mean again let me just also underline that my argument, such as it is really just like a kind of literature survey, I would say, of trying different ways to say the same thing. The Old Testament way, the sort of like arch-reactionary, post-revolutionary sort of sense of things, and then a much more modern, let's say, but still very religious Lincoln way, all saying the same thing, which is the check is in the mail. Now, like. You tell me which part of that makes you uncomfortable after everything you've just said right now, which is that is Trump himself? How about this is the question: is Trump himself a uniquely I don't know, how do you put it, like powerful individual who, is talented at politics, and is sort of like a passing storm to all of us who are just fine otherwise? Or is there something bigger wrong, I guess, is the question. Because that's really all I'm getting at. You can strip away all the religious, all the providential stuff, but that's really all I'm getting at in all of this. Is there something bigger off that gives us a Trump, who is a uniquely talented politician? I will never cease pointing that out. We're not likely to see another one like him. Though I do want to also quibble with something you said, Shadi, about authoritarianism. Is something like Trump required? I mean, I don't know. Like Maduro seems like a dull piece of shit, and
No, in a country
like
ours,
what's his name
that
in Syria?
isn't- in a country like ours that doesn't really have a long and obvious tradition of authoritarianism from our two parties, that for someone to popularize it and to make it mainstream and to have his entire party go along for the ride, I think you need to be a man or woman of special talent to kind of make that happen. And the fact that he is charismatic and funny and occasionally hilarious, I think it takes the bite off of it. It makes it more palatable for a kind of audience that normally wouldn't be so willing to go along with it.
I guess
I would agree with that.
So let me just push you both then. I guess my instinct is that we were headed towards authoritarianism, and that the actual strands were all there, and it took someone like Trump to maybe gather them more quickly together. Congress has been declining for a very long time as an actor within our politics. The executive has been getting stronger. These fights have been going on for a very long time. One can even trace them to the history of the republic, how they've been like playing out, but they've certainly been sharpened into this or this point. So we're headed to a point with an increasingly stronger executive, an increasingly more defiant executive of the other branches. Again, yeah, I think Trump is a unique specimen, and he's particularly talented. But rule by executive order has been a thing over the last three presidencies. Increasingly now, again, you look at the charts. Trump is off the charts for this, but so an accelerant, but certainly not an innovator in any of this sort of stuff. The questions about the executive's prerogative over the executive branch likely would have come up at one point or the other. I don't know, I do think that it's a kind of perfect storm. I'll grant you that. But and maybe we're talking about the difference between a Category 1 and Category 3 hurricane. But I'm not so sure that we're looking at something so unique and unimaginable. I feel like the decay was there. Now, again, whether this is, providence or not is sort of irrelevant to me, and it's irrelevant to my question here. And this is what I mean by, deserving it. I think we've all been complicit in the decay of all of this. The decay is deeper. The decay is not just institutional. I'll also say it's another topic that we've been kicking around here a lot. Liberalism as an organizing ideology is hollow and has been hollowing out a bunch of other stuff in the world. And into the breach, you get a bunch of other toxic, lame shit that defeats all of this. Yeah.
But
I
what
you're
with
saying
you on a lot of this, in the sense that I've long argued that Trump is a symptom and not a cause. And, we've been talking about decay on this podcast for years now, and we're both very critical of the way things were. I think we're both liberals who are critical of liberalism and so forth. Yep. So, yes.
Yes, but you're going to
I don't know. What were you?
You might have
You're
have
going
a
to quibble?
stronger disagreement then. Shadi agrees with me 100%.
You've been talking about it for years. How well you get along,
sorry,
ideas-wise.
Christine, can I just finish the thought?
Yeah, for sure.
It came back to me, and let me just, so I don't forget this. I was going to say, and here's me playing devil's advocate with myself, because I wrestle with this internally, which is that for all the decay that we've been talking about, America's pretty damn awesome, and it was pretty damn awesome. And I know we're not supposed to say this, but America was already great. And if you look at a lot of the metrics, America was somewhat unique in terms of economic growth among Western democracies, that where the European Union had stayed largely stagnant in terms of GDP growth and overall GDP from the financial recession in 2008 onwards, our GDP had come close to doubling just in the matter of 15 years. It's really a remarkable growth story. And I know that we can't measure America's health based on these very narrow economic metrics. And obviously, all of that belies the kind of sadness and general aimlessness that a lot of Americans feel. But in terms of material conditions, America is a pretty great success story. And I think that for a lot of us, and unfortunately, a lot of us tended to be in the Democratic Party. And this is why I've argued the Democratic Party became the party of the establishment, the party of the status quo. We're the ones who benefit from the status quo, people like us. And the fact that we couldn't see that so many Americans that had been left behind was our own blind spot. But still, at the end of the day, it's not like we were an authoritarian regime that had like a declining economy. Like, we also have to be fair. It wasn't that bad if we compare it to other countries.
But we have to, well, I mean, this is also a thing that we've discussed many, many times on this podcast. Yeah, first of all, I mean, we can be relatively great compared to other countries, and things can like still kind of suck in the lived experience of many Americans' lives. You point to GDP numbers, like, yeah, there's incredible GDP growth. As you acknowledged also a second afterwards, it was, extremely poorly distributed, and most of that GDP growth accrued to a small sector of the population. So many people are actually like not doing that great. I think you're allowed to say, I think we're in an era of free speech now, Shadi. You're allowed to say that America was already great. Like, there's no one holding you back from saying that or any other thing. But I mean, I think we can all agree that citizens had not been necessarily like beating the bounds of democracy, that liberalism had, in fact, turned people inwards. We were perhaps not paying attention to the increasingly accrued power of the executive branch, et cetera, et cetera. Like, all of this, like, there are all of these discontents that were still very much alive and moving in the United States, despite how many TVs we had or how big our SUVs have gotten. Like, I think it's patriotic to say that, America is great, like America is an economic powerhouse, et cetera, et cetera. But there are many other things that go into the success of a state or a republic. And yeah, America has been falling down on a number of them, and like many citizens were discontented. I think that's kind of obvious at this point.
Can't we also say, though, that we didn't realize how lucky we were? Like, yes, everything was so bad. American carnage. America was going through this. No,
I will totally hand it to you that we didn't realize how relatively calm and chill we had it. Like, that's 100% true too.
But remember, like, the argument's not about GDP or even like Gini coefficients or anything like that. We're talking about like political decay, or at least I'm talking about political decay. That's it for part one, dear listeners. There's a lot more where that came from. If you're not yet a paying subscriber, please head on over to wisdomofcrowds.live and become one. Help support our work. Hope to see you in the bonus.